Okay, we've pretty much come to the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. So hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Bar and Pie Charts using Spreadsheets for Integrated Reporting in FCS Express 7. My name is Rafael Gomez-Amaro. I'm a Technical Applications Specialist with DeNovo Software. If you are new to us into FCS Express, our company is based in Southern California, just outside of downtown Los Angeles, and we've been providing flow and image cytometry data analysis and reporting software for over 20 years. Now, if you have any questions today during our webinar, please feel free to ask those at any time by entering those questions into the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. Before we jump into today's webinar, I wanted to highlight a few of our upcoming webinars that are starting next week. On this page here, we have 5 webinars listed that are part of our Winter Webinar Series, which will be going on through early March. With the 2020 Winter Series, we will be broadcasting webinars to you on a weekly basis. Now, if you're just hearing about the webinars on the screen here, no need to worry. There's still plenty of time for you to register on our website. Just go to www.denovosoftware.com and navigate to the upcoming webinars section to sign up. So first, let's start our webinar today with a quick outline of what we're going to be covering. And we'll begin with a few simple examples today to show you how to build bar and pie charts. And the 2 methods that we'll be commonly using today to do this are drag and drop. So we'll show you how to drag and drop gates, statistics, text, and other charts onto each other to build bar and pie charts. You can also use spreadsheets to derive and chart custom data, or even create any statistics that are not standard in the software. You can actually calculate those in our spreadsheets in FCS Express and then chart that data. We can also do other statistical testing like you would find in other programs like Microsoft Excel or GraphPad Prism. So spreadsheets are really the object that you will want to use to format the visual features of your bar and pie charts. So how can you format those bar and pie charts? What are the offerings that we have? Well, for bar charts, we can do things like format the bar colors that are going to be assigned to each bar, highlighting parameters so that we can make conditional statements in our spreadsheets to highlight specific bars of interest. And we can also add error bars based on statistics or custom calculations made in that spreadsheet. For pie charts, we can do things like add a ring to look at more than one parameter of our data. We can explode slices using conditional statements to highlight individual slices. We can also do things like change the color of our slices. So we can use a color scheme, a default color scheme in the software for our pie chart, or we can define each slice color based on a token or manual text. So let's begin our tutorial today with a bar chart analysis. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up a pre-built layout here. And on this layout, we have several density plots showing data across 3 different samples, sample 1, sample 2, and sample 3. And on the plot to the left, we've identified our parent population and created a gate. On the 3 plots to the right, we've applied that parent gate, and then for each one of these samples, we've created 3 additional gates, gates 1, 2, and 3, to capture each of the 3 subsets shown in these samples. Below each of the plots, you can see that we have a statistic table, and the tables correspond to the plot above them. And we can see the gate name, the number of events, percentage of gated cells, and the percentage of all cells are the statistics we've captured there. Now from this basic template here, I'll be showing you how we can quickly build a bar chart by dragging and dropping different objects and text values that contain the information we would like to chart. So to add in a bar chart, we need to go up to the Insert tab. And this is where we're going to add in any object in FCS Express, like our plots, our spreadsheets, our charts, and other types of things. Now in this chart section, we see 5 different chart options: bar, pie, box and whisker, scatter, and scatter with built-in regression modeling. And what we'll be doing over the next few weeks and months is having webinars that are going to be focusing on each one of these major types of charts. For today, we're going to focus on bar and pie charts. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this bar chart, and I'm just going to simply draw the shape of that chart onto my layout here. And that's how you add bar charts, just like a plot or gate. You just draw it onto your layout. Now we have an empty bar chart. And for starters, I'm going to come up to my first plot here, and I'm going to select my gate 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop this gate 1. We're going to click and hold And now I'm going to place it onto my empty bar chart. Now notice my bar chart now has a blue outline and my cursor has a small plus icon below it, meaning the chart is willing and ready to accept the information I'm going to now drop onto it. So once I release my mouse, we get this create statistic window here. And you can see that I can now insert in a number of different statistics. For this example, I'm going to choose the percentage of gated cells. Notice, however, that the gate box here has already selected my gate 1. FCS Express knew that I dragged and dropped that gate, and so it pre-selected that for me. So to add in that statistic, I'm just going to click OK. And now I have my bar for sample 1, gate 1. I'm going to do the same thing for these other two samples here. I'm going to grab my gate 1 and I'm going to drag and drop that onto an empty place on my chart. And here we'll grab the same statistic and we'll repeat this for sample 3. Now I have my bar chart all set up for each one of my 3 samples. In addition to dragging and dropping from the gates that I just showed you, we can also drag and drop from the text in our plots and also from the statistics in our statistics tables. So in this next example, I'm going to be dragging and dropping from the statistics table the percentage of gated cells for gate 2 here, sample 1. But because I want to add in a new series to this chart, I actually want to place my gate 2 statistics to the right of my gate 1 for each sample. Instead of dragging and dropping it right onto the charted area, I'm going to drag and drop it below the axis line. And when I do that, you'll see that now I have my new series that appeared on the bar chart as a red bar right next to my statistic for my gate 1. I'm going to do the same thing for my next 2 samples. I'm going to grab the gate 2 statistic and I'm going to drag over my plot. But notice this time when I drag over the charted area, I get this placeholder bar. And essentially to have my bar appear where I want it for my second series, I'm going to need to drop my statistic on top of the placeholder bar at the location that new bar needs to appear. In this case, for gate 2 in my second series. Let's do that same thing now for my third sample. Drag and drop it onto the placeholder, and there we go. Now that I have my bar chart set up, one of the great things about FCS Express is that all these plots and all these gates and tables, they're all linked in my layout. So if I do something like select my parent gate here and I start moving it around, I can see that all my statistics, my plots, and my charts are going to update for me in real time. And this is a very powerful feature in FCS Express because it means that I can interact with my data and see those results update for me as I make the changes without having to go back and copy and paste and export this data out into some spreadsheet program to update that chart. Now we can also add data to our charts from other charts. So what I'm going to do here is make a brand new chart down at the bottom. I'm going to go back up to my Insert tab and I'm going to select Bar. And this time I'm just going to click onto the layout and you'll see that the software just adds in a pre-sized chart for me, but it's an empty bar chart. So for this bar chart, I'm going to add in information for my gate 3 for each one of these samples. So we'll start with my sample 1. And again, I'm going to drag and drop right onto that chart. We're going to grab the percentage of gated cells and I'm going to click OK. And there's my data for gate 3. Now to show you that we can, I'm just going to grab data from my statistic table as well and drag and drop it right on there. And you'll see that it placed that data right onto that chart with no issue. So I can grab data from wherever I need to and place it onto the same chart. There's no problem or need to grab always the gates or always the data in these stat tables. You can just grab the data from wherever you need and chart them. Now that we have our third population charted, we can add these values to our original chart by dragging and dropping this chart onto my original chart. And since I want to add this gate 3 data as a new series here, I'm going to drag and drop it right below my axis line. And once I've done that, FCS Express will open up this Paste Special dialog and it will ask me how I want to add that data. And in this case, I want to add my bar chart as an overlay or a new series to my chart. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And we can see now that I have my chart here with all 3 series of gates in one place. So to recap, to set up bar charts, we just need to drag and drop our data. And that can be from our gates, it can be from our text boxes or our statistic tables, or even from other bar charts. So now that we're finished with this first example and kind of getting familiar with drag and drop, I'm going to clean up my layout here. I'm going to get rid of this extra bar chart there. And I want to start talking about how we can edit and format our original chart. Because when formatting our charts, probably the first things we might want to think about doing is maybe adding in some error bars, or maybe I want to change the coloring defaults I see on my individual bars or series. And to do that, we actually need to use spreadsheets. In FCS Express, when you chart your data, the software is going to automatically generate a spreadsheet for you in the background that contains all of those charted values. To pull up that spreadsheet, you need to first look for its name. And by default, the charts in our software will show you in the title the name of that auto-generated spreadsheet. In this case, we're going to be looking for spreadsheet number 12. Now, with the name of that spreadsheet in hand, I can then pull it up, put it onto my layout, and format that spreadsheet. So to do that, I need to go to my View tab, and from here, I need to go to my Navigator section and click on Data Navigators. Here you can see that I have every object inside of FCS Express that's loaded in, my FCS files and my spreadsheets. And you can see that I have my auto-generated spreadsheet 12 that matches that chart there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load in that spreadsheet. I'm just going to drag and drop it onto an empty space on my layout, and I'm going to load it in as a data grid. That will insert in my spreadsheet for me. And when I click OK, there's my spreadsheet. Now this spreadsheet's like any other object in FCS Express. I can move it around, I can resize it. Here I'm going to extend it all the way across the bottom there, and I'm also going to close out my data navigator because we no longer need that. Now when you click on a spreadsheet, you'll see that they're just like any other spreadsheet that you find in other programs. So you can type in text into them and you can do other things to format them. But you'll also notice in FCS Express that when you click on a spreadsheet, you get two new tabs up at the top of the screen. And you can see that I have a layout tab here, and this is going to allow me to format the physical properties of the spreadsheet, and that'll be the fonts, that'll be the formatting and sorting. I can insert rows and columns or even format individual cells. I also have a formulas tab here, and this is where I can find and insert in different pre-built in formulas. And we have these nice and listed here for you. And these are, again, very similar to what you're going to find in Excel or Prism. So what we're going to do in this example is we're going to be changing the properties of our spreadsheet and also this bar chart. Now to format any object in FCS Express, be it a plot or a spreadsheet or a table or even a chart, we need to select that object, then right-click on it and choose Format. And in FCS Express 7, what this does is open up a live dockable formatting window. So this is a new feature to version 7, and this makes formatting much simpler. This dockable formatting window allows us to view and edit the properties of any selected object. You'll see that this will change based off of what I'm selecting here. And so there's no more right-clicking and formatting and making the change and clicking OK. You can just have this up all the time and select what you want to format. So one of the other things to note about this dockable formatting window is it is dockable, so I can move it around and I can dock it off to the left, the right, or the bottom of my screen, or even to other dockable formatting windows, like our data list, which I'll be showing you in a few moments. So let's go ahead and select our bar chart here, and we're gonna have a look at the different formatting options. Now, at the top of my dockable formatting window, you see that I have a drop-down menu, and this shows me all the different formatting categories. So like with 1 and 2D plots, I can format things like the border, the fill, the title, even the axes, and the scaling of the data that I had. But for working with charts, we're going to mainly be touching on the overlays formatting category. And when we add a new series to our bar chart, each one of those series is going to be represented as a new overlay. And you can see them listed here in my 2D bar overlays list. So for my first overlay here, that's for my gate 1 data. My second overlay is for gate 2, and my third overlay is for my gate 3 that you saw me add to my chart. Note that the third overlay also comes from a different spreadsheet from the first two, because I pulled that data into another chart and it generated its own unique spreadsheet. So let's go ahead and select this first overlay. And when we select an overlay, we can edit all the different properties of that overlay from the 2D bar overlays options. And it's a pretty substantial section. So up at the top, we have the bar labels. And here we can select a different source column from our spreadsheet, pulling data from column A or column B. Similarly, I can change my bar values. I can pull data from either one of these options or whatever I have in my spreadsheet. Below that, we have our error bar parameters. To add in error bars to my chart, I would need to add in that data into a column in my spreadsheet, and then I would go and select that column from my error bars in the overlays options. We also have the ability to use a highlight parameter. This lets us use conditional statements that yield true or false to highlight a particular bar. And below that, we can even set a highlight color for that bar. So to answer the question, how do you label the different samples on the axes? You can add in a column label here, and I'll show you all how to do that as we go along inside of this webinar. So moving on, down below that, we have some additional options that I want to touch on here. So that'll be the ability to modify the bar shapes, the lines, and the borders. So in the bar option section here, I can do things like change the bar color and the bar fill style for each one of my different overlays. So in this first example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change the bar color here for my first overlay. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, and I'm going to make this a dark blue color. So we'll go ahead and find dark blue, and we'll select that. And you can see that that bar on my chart has updated its color immediately. So let's do that a couple more times. I'm going to go ahead and select my next overlay, and in this case, I'm going to change the color to a dark red. So I'll find dark red, and that color updated immediately. For the next example here, I'm going to change this to a green. And of course, this could be any color that I want to pick here. Green stands out. But the idea here is that whenever you make a change, that change is going to update in real time. And you don't actually have to select one overlay at a time. If, let's say, you want to change the color or some other option of multiple overlays, you can just hold down Shift or Control and multiple select those and make the changes to one or multiple overlays. Whatever you need to do to give your chart the color and aesthetics you need to use. So in addition to the bar options, below that we have the bar border options. And this is where we can change things like the bar border style and the color. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an outline to one of my series of bars on my chart. And how I'm going to do that is by changing first the bar border style. So I'm going to add in a border here. And you can probably barely just see that dark outline for my third overlay, my third series chart. So I'm going to change the color here to a bright pink, so maybe we can see it a little bit better. And the next thing I'm going to do is increase the line width so that we can really see that border outline. And essentially what this allows me to do is add that bright outline onto its border to make that overlay stand out on the chart. Now, while I can further build out this spreadsheet and I can add a whole bunch of new columns and values to this bar chart, for simplicity, I'm just going to start from scratch and I'm going to build a brand new spreadsheet, put in data there, and then I'm going to build a bar chart. So you can just see how easily we can do that from essentially starting with just the data in your analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these two objects here. And I'm going to go ahead and insert in a spreadsheet and start working with that. So up at the top, I'm going to go up to my Insert tab, and I'm going to go ahead and select the spreadsheet to insert that in. FCS Express is going to prompt me to name that spreadsheet. It's going to be percent of gated comparison. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I have my spreadsheet added in here. So I'll go ahead and expand this out, and then we're going to start filling in the columns. And in this new spreadsheet, we're going to start by adding column headers. And what this is going to do is this is going to let us add names to our spreadsheet, and this is going to let us label our populations of interest and easily identify which columns to use when we're editing our bar charts, because that's going to show up now in the axes instead of A or B. It's going to show, the gate name or the sample or whatever statistic I have there. My label I put in my spreadsheet will show up on my chart. So here what I'm going to do is just start adding those in. And so what we're going to do is grab data from some gates. So I'm going to put in the column header for that gate name. We're going to grab data from several samples. So I'm going to type in sample 1, sample 2, and sample 3. And then we're going to pull out some statistics here. So we're going to calculate an average from each of those samples. We're going to calculate a standard deviation based off of those values. And I'm also going to show you an example how we can highlight the bars in our bar charts. So next we're going to add in data that we want to chart. And since my statistic tables have all the data I want to grab, and that data is already in the correct order here, I'm just going to grab these values from my tables and pull them in. So here I'm going to grab the gate names, and I'm just going to drop them in right here. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my percentage of gated cells, and I'm going to do this for sample 1. I'm going to do it for sample 2. And again, you see these are in the right order, gate 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to do that for sample 3. And now I've just quickly pulled out data that I want to chart, but ultimately I want to chart averages. I want to chart some sort of meaningful statistic. And so with spreadsheets, we have the ability to use those built-in formulas and also custom built formulas to generate those kind of calculations. For an average statistic, I could do something like type that in directly into FCS Express. So I can come here and hit the enters or equal sign, and I can type in average, open parentheses, and I could multiple select all of these different samples, and I can fill that in just like I would in Excel. Or rather than doing all that typing, we can just use a built-in formula. So I can go up to my formulas tab in FCS Express and I can find in the statistical dropdown my average. And then from there, I can just click and drag to select the different arguments that I want to fill in, those different samples, just like you would in Excel. And I'm going to hit enter. And there we have my value for my average. The next thing that I can do to make things even easier is I can actually duplicate this down to the different cells in this column here. And like you'd find in Excel, if I go ahead and double click on one of these, you'll see that it's updated the new values inside of that cell, and it's now referenced the correct values that I want for this new gate on my spreadsheet. So we can do the same thing with our error bars. In this case, instead of looking for the average, we're going to be looking for the standard deviation. So here I'm going to go ahead and click and type in equals, and then I'm going to go back up to my formulas tab, and I'm going to type in statistical. And you see that we have these in alphabetical order, so I just need to scroll down and find my standard deviation. So here I'll go ahead and click on my standard deviation, and then I'm going to go ahead and click and drag again, and there are my arguments, and then I'll copy and paste this down. So now that I have my values here, if we need to edit the output to change things like the number format or the number of decimal places, because maybe I don't need this number of significant figures in my average or standard deviation, I can do things like highlight my average and standard deviation, and I can go and format the number format for these. So I can highlight them, go to my layout tab in this case, and I'll go to format, format cells. And here I'm going to change that to a number format. And I'm just going to leave this at 2 decimal places and click OK. And now my data is a bit tidier. Now, alternatively, I can just right click on these highlighted cells and go to format cells, and that'll bring me to the same screen directly. So that's 2 different ways to quickly format the data values inside of your spreadsheet cells. So next, I'm going to show you how to create a conditional statement so that we can pick and choose the bars of interest to highlight in our bar chart. So we're going to fill in this highlight column now. Now for this example, we're going to be using a simple if statement. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to highlight the values in this column here if the average is going to be less than 45. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in equal sign and if, and then I'm going to enter in a conditional statement. And this is how we do if statements. You have to type in if, and then you have to give it a conditional statement that evaluates to true or false, and then you will evaluate that if statement. So here I'm going to click on my average, and we're going to look to see if this is less than 45, and I'm going to hit enter. And for gate 1, we can see that that if statement evaluated to true. So if we're using this column to highlight our parameter, our bars, that means that whichever bar this value corresponds to would be highlighted in the bar chart. So let's go ahead and add in a couple more if statements. We're going to do that for our gate 2. We're going to type in if, and we're going to give it a conditional test here. In this case, the average value needs to be greater than 45. So I'll go ahead and type that out and hit enter. And we're just going to copy and paste that test down for gate 3. And what we can see is that both of those statements evaluated to false. Our average is indeed not greater than 45, meaning that the bars for gates 2 and 3 are not going to be highlighted when we set our highlight parameter here. So now that we have our spreadsheet built, we can add in a new bar chart relatively quickly. I just need to, again, go back up to my insert tab, select my bar, and then I'm just going to draw the shape of that bar that I want onto my layout here. And in this new chart, we can see a couple of different things. One is that the title of our bar chart here, the percentage of gated comparison, that's the same as the spreadsheet that we just built, meaning that the data referenced in this chart is the data that's being drawn from the spreadsheet to the right. One of the things I do notice here is that this text is a little bit small. It's kind of hard to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and increase the text size here. I'm going to go up to my text tab, and I'm just going to increase the font size to 15. And now it's much easier to see our title as well as our different column labels here. Now notice in this chart, we're still referencing these source values with the default column headers, A and B, on my chart and in my spreadsheet. But if we wanted to, we could instead refer to the labels we've added in that first row of our spreadsheet. Now to do that, we need to format our spreadsheet. And since our formatting window is already open, I'm just going to go ahead and click on my spreadsheet. And then I'm going to access the formatting categories here, and I'm going to pick spreadsheet data. And what I'm going to do is check this box to use the values in the first row as labels. And now you can see on my chart that our bar chart has those labels for my column A. In this case, it's gate now, and sample 1, which is my header for column B. So this makes things much easier since we don't have to guess what columns A and B are anymore. We can actually just refer to what these columns, these data actually represent, the labels that we've given them. So now that our bar chart is set up, we're ready to format it. And to do that, once again, we need to select the object we want to format, in this case, the bar chart. And then we need to go up to the overlays formatting category. And here again is where we can edit many of the different properties of our bar chart. Note that by default, we are charting the data in the first two columns. So column A and column B, those are going to be charted gate and sample 1. And you can see that as my bar label, gate, bar value, sample 1. But we can change these values to show something else. For example, I can change my bar value to show the data from sample 2. And you'll see that once I've done that, my bar values update immediately. So let's change some other things on this chart, starting with adding in an error bar parameter. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to choose my standard deviation, and there are my error bars. Next, we're going to set a highlight column in our spreadsheet as the highlight parameter. So I'll go ahead and use that drop down, select highlight, and this will allow us to highlight any bar where the highlight column equals true. And notice that immediately we see for bar 1, for that gate 1, that's changed to the light blue color. But we can also change that highlight color to something else, maybe an orange color, by coming up to the highlight color dropdown and selecting a different color. And now we can see that my gate 1 bar has now been highlighted to orange instead of light blue. Now, you also might notice that these error bars are a bit hard to see, especially with this black background for these two bars. So we can go ahead and edit those error bars. Again, I'm going to come down to my overlays tab, and I'm going to go down to the error bars in this line section this time. And I'm going to change a couple of things. First, I'm going to change the color. We're going to make this a nice and bright red color. And then I'm going to increase the width of those error bars just so that we can see them a bit better. And now those error bars really stand out on those black backgrounds there. So for this relatively simple example, again, if we come up to the first plot and we start adjusting our parent gate here, what we're going to see is that not only do the data in our plots and our statistic tables update, but also the data in those spreadsheets and the data that we've charted, those calculations and statistical comparisons, the error bars, all of that's updating in real time for us as we move around our data. It's being redone and replotted. And this makes data analysis really interactive in FCS Express, because if I go up to the data tab and I open up my data list, we're going to see that in this analysis, I actually don't have just 3 samples. I have 3 sets of 3 samples. And what I can actually do is push between those 3 different sets of data. And you can see that my data on my charts, they're going to update for me in real time as I push that new data into my analysis. And we can go through this data set also by a batch process, so I don't have to manually click on these to see those results. So if I go up to my batch tab and I go and hit run, what's going to happen is that FCS Express is going to go through my 3 different samples of data and automatically update the information in my charts and then send it out into a PDF or a PowerPoint or an Excel document or whatever I had set as my batch process. So here, what I have for my batch process, it opened up a PowerPoint. And in this PowerPoint, we can see that we have all of the different plots on our slides here. I have 3 slides, and if you notice, if I change the slide, that's updating for each one of those 3 sets of data that I had. So I was able to archive all of that information very quickly. So for our final bar chart example, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how, instead of pulling out data and looking at maybe one set of data files or things that we have charted here from one file, I'm going to show you how you can pull data from all the files in your data list. And so I'm going to go ahead and dock this data list off to the left here. And what we're going to do is we're going to delete our chart and we're going to delete our spreadsheet. And we're going to insert in one more time a brand new empty spreadsheet. And I'm just going to call this data files, and I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and load this down onto my layout here, resize it just a little bit so it fits well here. And what we're going to do is we're going to extract statistics out from the data list directly. And to do that, we need to use the drag and drop method. And this allows us to select maybe one of our files and I can drag and drop it into the spreadsheet, or I can select multiple files, or in this case, all of my files. And I'm going to drag and drop all these into that first cell in my spreadsheet. And we're going to grab some statistics. So I'm going to choose my statistic token and I'm going to click OK. And when you're working with pulling data from the data list, you have to remember a couple things. And first is that you need to select a parameter. Now, I'm not going to extract anything in this first example that depends on a parameter, but I still need to select one. So I'm going to click on time. I'm not going to grab anything that's gated because what I want to do here is I want to grab the file name and I want to grab just the total number of events in that file. And I'm just going to click OK. And FCS Express is going to immediately push in those different statistics. I'm going to have my file name and my number of events here. And you can see they've been given a label. Each of those data sets is in its own column. And then each file value is in its own row here. So the number of events for this particular file is going to fall right here in this cell. So I'll repeat that one more time. I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop from my data list. And here I'm going to drop it right into my cell. And I'm going to grab another statistic. This time I'm going to grab an MFI, and that actually depends on a parameter. So I'm going to pick my correct parameter here. I'm also going to select one of my gates, and we're going to grab that median value. And I'm going to click OK. And what you're going to note here is the data was automatically populated, but also note that we didn't actually get a title here because I just pulled in a single statistic. We don't populate the title. It's only when you have multiple stats going in that we'll differentiate what each one of these columns is going to represent for you. So we have our bar chart here and we have all the information we need to chart. So what we're going to go ahead and do is format the charted data. And so first I'm going to type in a label for that column that I just added. And then we're going to go ahead and set this spreadsheet to show the column labels when I start charting it. And to do that, I'm going to click on my spreadsheet and we're going to go back up again to the spreadsheet data and check the box to use the values in the first row as labels. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and insert in my bar chart. And as long as I have my spreadsheet selected, I'll go ahead and draw that in. You're going to see that my bar chart is going to populate with that file name here, that label I gave in my spreadsheet, and then in the second column, it's going to have the number of events on my y-axis. So let's make this a little bit bigger so that we can see that data a bit better here. And for this chart, rather than look at the number of events, I'm going to change the bar values to the median. Now I can do that for my overlays formatting category. I can come up to my bar values and I can change this to median. Or alternatively, just like the different parameters on my plots up at the top, I can do the same thing in my charts. I can click on the parameter label and I can change the parameter to what I want from the dropdown. So we have our data charted here. It's all the correct data. We're looking at our file name versus the median now. And what we're going to do is start interacting with it. So here I'm going to go ahead and move around my gate 1. And notice as I move my gate 1, you can see that in my chart, the data is updating. In my spreadsheet in the background, you can see that median value is updating for me. So all this is going to be recalculated and redrawn and updated as we make our changes. And this allows us to compare all of our data at once and quickly and easily interact and see how those changes to our analysis are going to impact our results. But I want to move on to the next topic for our charting webinar, which is pie charts. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this pie charts example here. And pie charts are really great because they allow us to compare the experiment as a whole. If you wanted to look at the percentages of a population, pie charts, just like bar charts, can be quickly set up in FCS Express. So let's go ahead and open up our layout for the pie charts, which we have here on the screen. We have a cell cycle experiment, and with the plots up at the top, I have 2 different gates I've created, and we're just focusing in on our actual cells, not debris, and then we're just removing any doublets or other things that we don't want involved. And then below in these charts, I have some histograms here showing my cell cycle data, and I've gone ahead and created some gates, and you can see that I have colored in those gates up at the top here. And what we're going to be doing here is using those gate colors on our actual analysis when we start filling in our pie chart. So on my second page here, I have the actual report of this data. And you can see very quickly here that we have 2 different cycling populations. We have a diploid population and we have an aneuploid population. And this is a multi-cycle chart here, and this is something that you can insert into FCS Express here. This is multi-cycle DNA analysis or cell cycle analysis, and this comes automatically with our software when you purchase the Flow version. So what we're going to be doing today is basically creating a pie chart to represent the percentages of these cell cycle populations that we see here in this plot and in this table here. And we're going to use that pie chart to represent all that data in one graph. So we're going to start by inserting in a pie chart. So I'm going to come up to my charting section here, and I'm going to select pie, and I'm going to draw the shape of that pie chart onto my layout. It's going to be empty because we don't have a spreadsheet we're referencing yet. And so to fill it, we just need to drag and drop like before. So I'm going to start with my diploid population here, my percentage of G1, and I'm going to drag and drop that right onto my pie chart. And you can see here that it filled in the pie, and I have my percentage here labeled off to the right. Now to add in another slice of the pie, I would just need to go ahead and drag and drop that next statistic onto an empty space of this pie chart. And here you can see that I have my second slice or wedge. I'm going to go ahead and do that for my S phase there. I'm going to drop that in. And now we can see that my pie chart has all three of those slices for each one of the phases of my cell cycle. And those were automatically populated with the corresponding values in that little text box on the outside. So if we want to edit or format the pie chart, we can again open up our live dockable formatting window, and we could do that by right-clicking on this and selecting format. Alternatively, I can just double click on my pie chart and I can open up that formatting window. And that'll work with any plot or any other object in FCS Express. So for the pie charts, we need to go back into the overlays formatting category. Again, that's where we do all of our formatting for our charts, the overlays. And here in the pie chart overlays options, you can see that I have a number of new parameters. The first one being the value parameter, and that's used to set the values for our slices. I have a name parameter, and that allows us to annotate the slices that we have here with some text, a name, rather than just the percentage or value or color here. The ring parameter allows us to add a second set of data around the outside of this pie chart. So if you think about this chart like a donut, I have my original data in the center, that's the donut hole, maybe, and around the ring, I'm going to have the donut itself, and that will be my second parameter. Below the ring, we have the explode parameter, and that lets us highlight specific slices based on a conditional statement. And we also have the color parameter, and that lets us specify the exact color we want our slices to be. Note that for both of these two parameters, explode and color, those need to be done in a spreadsheet. Now, further below that, we have our color scheme, and this allows us to select from a drop-down and automatically populate the slices with various different color schemes. So if I wanted to change that from default to solid, you can see that I have a different color scheme for each of those wedges, or I go to rainbow here, and that's a completely different scheme. Now, with color schemes, you need to keep in mind that we don't actually have direct control over the color assigned to each wedge. We can only control the color palette as a whole. If we want to control the color of each wedge, that is where we would need to use the color parameter and a spreadsheet. So we also have below that the option to show our pie chart as a donut. So you can see I have a little checkbox here to show as a donut chart. And if I check that, I'll get a little hole inside of my pie chart, and I can control the size of that hole from my hole size dialog. Below that, we have our caption style, and that box is going to allow us to set the values that we're going to be displaying here in these little boxes around each one of our little slices or wedges. I can set it to show the value, or I can change it to show maybe the name and the percentage. And as long as I have a name parameter selected, that'll show up that value there alongside my percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the name there. We're just going to show that percentage for now. Now, moving back to annotating my chart, I can actually add in a legend once I add a name parameter. We haven't done that yet, but you'll see that in just a moment. And once I have a legend, I can do things like annotate that legend with a title. And I can do that by just typing in that text that I want to make the legend title right here in this dialog. So let's start by formatting this pie chart and using a spreadsheet to do that. And we're going to need to locate that spreadsheet again. I can see its title, it's spreadsheet 2 in my pie chart title. And what I'm going to do is go back up to my view tab, and we're going to go once again to the data navigator. And I'm going to drag and drop that spreadsheet 2 right onto my empty layout here. And we're going to load it in as a data grid. And so I'll go ahead and close that data navigator, and I'm going to move this spreadsheet here, and I'm going to expand it a bit because we're going to add in a few more things. So what we're going to start off with is we are going to modify this spreadsheet to add in a few additional rows and columns. Now we can see that the data we have here is just those 3 diploid values in our population statistics for G1, G2, and S. So if I want to add in some additional rows of data, I can do that by just simply selecting one of my cells, in this case, A1, and I can go up to my layout tab, and from here I can insert in an additional row, and that's going to allow me to add in column headers, and I'm going to insert in an additional column so that I can possibly put data off to the left here. And so once we have our column labels and our rows that we want to have added in, we can start viewing the data on our chart. So I'm going to start off by adding in the titles or the column labels to the spreadsheet. And for this column B here, again, we have the data for our diploid population, and this is going to be represented by the pi data that we're going to chart. And so I'm going to label this pi and diploid, and that'll show our diploid values. The next column, I'm going to actually add in some additional data, and this is going to be for our ring data, and that's actually going to show us our aneuploid population values. And so I'll go ahead and enter that in. We're going to add in a couple more column titles for some of those custom features I've been talking about, like the color, the name, and the explode parameters. So I'm going to type in right here color for the color column. We're going to type in name for the name column and explode for that explode column. And now that I have my column labels, we're going to start filling in some values here. And we're going to start by adding in this case, the name column. And so I know this is my G1, so I'll type that in, G2, and I know that that is for my S phase values. So there's the name. The next thing I'm going to do is add in the data for my aneuploid column here. And I'm just going to drag and drop, you might have guessed it, from my statistic table. So I'll grab my percentage of G1, I'll grab my percentage of G2, oops, need to grab that, and I'll grab my percentage of S, and I will go ahead and fill out that column there. Now at this point, you probably noticed that my pie chart has disappeared, and the reason for that is actually pretty simple. By default, my pie chart has been trying to graph the values in this first column, of which there are none. So what we need to do now is specify what value or columns I want to chart. Before we do that though, I need to set up this spreadsheet to use these column labels. So right now you see I have this spreadsheet selected, and we have our spreadsheet formatting section open. So I'm going to go ahead and just check this box to use the values in the first row as labels. And now we're going to go ahead and specify the source columns for our pie chart. And to do that, I'm going to select my pie chart, and then we're going to go to our overlays formatting category. And from there, we can see all of the values we're going to be charting. So we're going to go ahead and set first the value parameter. So I'm going to choose that drop down, and we're going to set that to our diploid values. That's going to be our pi data. Next is going to be our name parameter, which we've already filled in, but I'll go ahead and select that to name, and there we go. Next, I'm going to add in my ring parameter. We're going to set that to aneuploid. And now you can see that I have my pi data diploid on the inner ring or inner pi, and my aneuploid data on that outer ring. And each one of those wedges corresponds to those values for the diploid or aneuploid population respectively. I'm also going to go ahead and set my explode parameter to the explode column and color parameter to the color column. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go to our spreadsheet and now populate those values. So the first thing that we're going to set is our color parameter. And I can essentially set each color of these wedges to whatever custom color I want just by typing that in here for the corresponding population or value. So here I'm going to type in red for my G1, and my G1s are going to turn to red. I'm going to type in green for my G2, and those G2s turn to green on my chart. I type blue for my S, and you'll see that those now change to the color that I wanted. But oftentimes we're going to find that we want to set our colors for our slices to particular things. Maybe you want to set the color to reflect the color of the gates in your analysis. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to go ahead and delete this color column, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a gate color token to essentially have the gates colors for each one of these populations be reflected in my pie chart. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Insert tab, and I'm going to open up a gate view. And this just shows my gating hierarchy so that you all can see the different gate colors I have for my different populations. And what we're going to do here now is we're going to go into each one of these different populations, and I'm going to insert in a token for my gate color. So here I'm going to open up the gate folder, select gate color. I'm going to select my gate name. In this case, it's going to be G1, and the information display is color. And when I click OK, you'll see that I have that blue color corresponding to my G1, exactly how I said it earlier for that gate. And then we have the color. It's actually a corresponding hex code because there's no color name for that blue. So let's do that a couple more times just so that you're familiar with this. I'm going to right click to insert in my token. I'm going to go to my gate color section. And this time we're going to grab data for G2. We're going to grab the color, and I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to do, lastly here, the color for my S-phase population. And so I'll go ahead and insert that in. And now you'll see that, again, all those colors match. In this case, because there's a simple name for that color, it's purple, it's going to be labeled with the text purple inside of the cell that I labeled that with. So we have our data now with the wedges corresponding to the gates. And now what I want to do is fill in the explode parameter. So recall that this needs to be based on a conditional statement, meaning it needs to evaluate to either true or false. So for our conditional statement here, again, we're going to be using an if statement. So I'm going to type in an equals and an if, and then I'm going to put in my criteria for the explode. And in this case, it's going to be whether or not the aneuploid population for G1 is going to be less than 75. And when I go ahead and evaluate that, you'll see that that evaluates to false. So nothing's happening on my chart. Let's do this again for G2. I'm going to type in if, and now we're going to look at the diploid value, and we're going to ask whether or not that is less than 5. And if I go ahead and return, you're going to see that that returned to true, and you can see now that my orange slice for my G2 is now exploding out from the chart. So we're going to do another statement here. The aneuploid is going to be less than 15 for my S phase, and I'm going to hit enter. And again, we have another expression that evaluated to true, so that slice will be broken away from the pie and the ring. And at this point, we have our spreadsheet and our pie chart all set up. And now we can start interacting with that analysis, and we can start changing things like our gates, or we can apply different kinds of options to these plots and see how this all reads out on our pie chart. So if someone looked at our chart as it is now, they may not be able to tell what color each of these different slices corresponds to. And since we have added a name parameter, we can remedy that issue by showing our legend. So I'm going to go ahead and select my chart here, and I'm going to go to the legend category. And from here, I'm going to make my legend visible. And you'll see that now I have a legend showing each one of the colors of my wedges and what they correspond to. Now, since my pie chart got small when I added that legend here, I can fix that by just moving that legend down to the bottom. And now it's a nice big pie chart again. We can also give this legend a title. So again, I'll go to my overlays formatting category, and I'll move down to my legend title. And I'm going to label this the phase because that corresponds to my cell cycle phase. Again, you'll notice that I have all that data updated in here. So if I had my name box checked, I just want you to note that because we have that name parameter labeled there now, you can see that I have the name on each one of these percentages outside of that slice. But since that information is redundant, I'm going to uncheck it and leave it there. And now I have a nice informative legend with a title on our pie chart. Now, to wrap things up for the last part of our tutorial today, I just want to emphasize that these pie charts are like any other object in FCS Express. So if I wanted to format, let's say the fill or the background or the border or the title, I could go ahead and select one of these categories, and I can change the background color, or I can change, let's say, the title to something different than auto-generated spreadsheet. I can change this to comparison of diploid populations and aneuploid populations. And you'll see that my title updates, and we can go on and so forth to make this as visually appealing as we need it to be. But really, at the end of the day, what I've just shown you is that I can make a quick report that's ready to go. And if I have other samples or other files, just like I did with my bar chart, I can batch through all that and send that data out to Excel or into a PowerPoint or a PDF. And so with that, we've come to the end of our webinar today. And so hopefully what I've shown you is how you can quickly create a bar chart in FCS Express using drag and drop or using spreadsheets. Bar charts allow you to display useful summaries of your data through that intuitive drag and drop capability. Pie charts, on the other hand, allow you to view various statistics as they relate to the whole population. But both of these chart types are flexible, and they can be fully formatted to provide you with a unique way to display your data. These tools are integrated to save you time by having all of the plots and spreadsheets and charts and everything else linked together so that they can update in real time as your data and gates change, so that you can see your results as you move around your analysis. So thank you everyone for attending our webinar today. We'll be staying on the line for the next few minutes to answer any questions that you might have had that I didn't cover. So please feel free to type those questions into the questions box of your GoToWebinar panel. Or if you'd like to contact us with questions in the future about this webinar or in general, you can reach us at support@denovosoftware.com or on our website at www.denovosoftware.com. There you can find all of our support resources, videos, tutorials, manuals, and knowledge-based pages. So thank you all again for joining us today, and you all have a great rest of your afternoon.